It's been a while. Gosh, the last few months have been absolutely jam-packed. I haven't had any time, or I haven't been able to make time to put together a video for YouTube, which is actually very bad. I'm trying to get on top of that. And what's actually brought me here today is that a couple of days ago, I was thinking back to my final year physiology class and how I kind of struggled with the central nervous system and understanding how this amorphous, jelly-like, wrinkly organ that sits within some fluid within our craniums is able to control every single thing that we do. You know, we talked about neurons and neurotransmitters and synapses, and all of these things they just didn't make imaginative sense to me. I couldn't picture how it worked. I could picture all the organs and understood how the heart worked. I'll actually make a video of the heart next, but the brain just constantly dumbfounded me. And so it inspired me to pull together this video as a bit of a reminder to myself about how amazing the brain is, and also a bit of a refresher to you guys as well. I'll take you through some fun facts about the brain and give you some main components and what they are responsible for. Right along. Alright, so let's start with some fun facts about the brain. I think the first one we'd start with is the fact that the brain on average weighs approximately 1.5 kilograms, which is about 2% of our average body weight. Now, in spite of this relatively minuscule size, the brain uses approximately 15% of our entire cardiac output. It also uses approximately 20% of our oxygen supply and 25% of the energy we produce in the form of glucose. The brain is a very metabolically active organ, and this is the reason why when you have a very mentally tasking day, you feel super tired afterwards. Your brain's used a lot of energy to do what it normally does. Next, did you know that the brain also is made of 75% water? This is another reason why I found it so difficult to understand how it does what it does, because it's almost all water. The brain also consists of about 100 billion neurons, which is just around the same number of stars in our galaxy. And the brain doesn't have any pain receptors, so the brain actually doesn't feel pain. And I'm sure you're thinking about this and saying, well, but I have headaches. Headaches are typically a sign of strain, tension within the muscles in our face, in our neck, in our head, or maybe something that's not going right within our blood vessels as well in the head, but not the brain. The brain actually doesn't feel any pain. Now, with those interesting facts in place, I'd like to paint you guys a bit of a picture about how the brain works and the different components. So first, let's start with our cerebrum. This is the big wrinkly bit that you generally would see when you have any visual representations of the brain. It's notoriously known to have two hemispheres, but it also has a few lobes. We have a frontal lobe that's responsible for our motor skills, so your ability to walk. It also is responsible for our critical thinking, our higher thinking, judgment, reasoning, impulse control, the ability to understand that you may want to do something now, but should you really be doing it now? That's all part of the frontal lobe. And that's the reason why a lot of people would use it as an excuse for bad decision making. To say, oh gosh, this person's frontal lobe probably isn't fully developed yet. That's all the frontal lobe. Next, we have the parietal lobe, which is responsible for sensory, so touch, taste, etc. We have our occipital lobe, which is responsible for our vision. And then we have our temporal lobe, which is responsible for our ability to communicate, so speech and auditory ability to understand communication. All of these different lobes and components form our cerebrum. The cerebrum is responsible for our thinking, our talking, our walking, your dreaming, and maybe even the fact that you're overthinking a text that you've just sent to someone yesterday night. Next up, say hello to the cerebellum. This is also known as our little brain, our tiny brain. It's generally overlooked, but it's such an important part of the brain, and it sits right below our cerebrum. It's generally responsible for our fine motor skills, so your ability to write and draw. It's responsible for your balance and equilibrium. If you didn't have a functional cerebellum, you'd be walking around like a baby giraffe. The cerebellum, actually, an interesting fact about it is, remember we talked about the brain having over 100 billion neurons? The cerebellum, despite being only about 10% of your brain in terms of volume, houses about 50% of those 100 billion neurons. So, your little brain is super important. Next up is our brainstem. This unsung part of the brain actually plays such an important role because it connects our brain to our spinal cord. It also controls a lot of our involuntary actions. So your breathing, your heartbeat, your sleeping, alertness, even blinking. It's a very important part of the brain, and it sits right between the top part of the brain, the cerebellum, and then our spinal cords. It's pretty much the autopilot function of our brain. Next in line is our limbic system, and this system consists of a few smaller components, including our hippocampus, our amygdala, and our hypothalamus. It's essentially responsible for our emotions. If you are like me and recently went to watch Sinners at the cinema and found it a little bit thrilling, well, that's probably because of your limbic system. It's responsible for you feeling sad, feeling emotional. If you're crying because you watched a movie, you felt really happy about something that's made you elated, that is because your limbic system is at work. So as you can see, the brain has some very distinct components, and each of these components is responsible for something really important within our body, within our lives. As much as it could be so abstract, the brain is such an interesting, important part of our bodies, and we should treasure it. In our next video, I'll actually take you through something that I enjoyed a lot more in my final year of varsity, which was the heart. The cardiovascular system was so beautiful for me because you could essentially see how it works. Oxygenated blood goes into the heart, gets pumped into the arteries, goes into your skeletal muscles, and wherever it's needed, supplies oxygen, comes back to the heart, goes back to the lung to collect more oxygen. Oh, and the circle goes over and over again. I will take you through all of that in the next video. But if you enjoyed today's video, please go ahead, like and subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one.